Welcome to workshop number 4, the final workshop in this workshop series. This one is going to be all about the application beyond the essay. So in review, in the first workshop, we talked a little bit about the difference between CSUs, UCs, and private schools. So the different types of schools you can apply to here in California and beyond. In workshop number 2, we introed what I consider to be the hardest part of the application process, which is constructing the essay. So we talked about how to construct the essay using something known as the alphabet technique. And then in workshop number 3, we talked about editing using the alphabet technique as well. So workshop number 4 is going to be all about the application beyond the essay, the other parts of the application that you need to put together to be able to get into college. So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll link workshop number 3, if you didn't get a chance to watch that, in the description below. So what are the parts of my application? So I based this off of the UC application, which allows you to apply to schools in the University of California system, such as UC Berkeley, UCLA, UC Davis. However, this is applicable for applications all across America and even the world. So all of this stuff will typically be found in any application that you open. So essays, prompts, and short answers. So I put a little check next to that because we have hit that and we have already kind of touched on how to construct those essays, prompts, and how to pull out your character and values. But they'll also ask you about things like volunteer and community service, awards and honors, extracurricular activities, your personal information and your family's personal information, test scores, and then there'll also be often an additional comment section. So we'll talk about how you can approach each one of these sections and really what admissions officers are looking for when it comes to evaluating each of these sections. So let's start with volunteer and community service. And a lot of the advice I'm going to give you is pretty generic because it can be used across all of the sections, such as extracurriculars, awards, and honors. So I would take note of all of them and know that they can be applicable to each section. So what I went ahead and did is I actually put my personal information out there, and I kind of screenshotted what my UC application section looked like. So it's limited to 5 spots, and every application will definitely have a limit because they don't want you to talk about 100 things. They want you to pick the 5 most meaningful things if you have 5. But they give you a cap of 5, at least on the UC application. And on the Common App, they'll give you a cap of 10, but it won't. The cap for 10 will be of all your activities. On the UC application, it's just a cap of 5, just for community and volunteer. So the sections have word limits. So the individual sections, whether you're looking at Little Goal Big Dreams organization, MDUSD Board of Education, those sections themselves have word limits. So you need to be really concise and to the point, which can be difficult. But there's a couple tips I can give you, and there's an exercise we'll talk about that can help you do that. The description should appear very objective, so I would leave out adjectives like I worked hard to do this, I worked hard to do that, or I worked diligently day and night, things like that. They should be objective, they should be to the point, and they should be matter of the fact. They should be something that can be proved. Complete sentences are definitely not required. Now, I did do it in complete sentences only because that's something that was important to me, but it should make sense. That's all that matters at the end of the day. They're not going to knock you if you don't have complete sentences. It's something nice to have, if possible. Use numbers. So empirical data can be really useful to demonstrate the scale of your contribution. So for example, if you look at Castle State Board, I talked about a little bit what I did as a Northern director, but then I also talked about what the membership was like and the estimated student count that membership falls under. So I wanted to show the scale of my contribution and kind of the scale of my volunteer and community service and what I was doing. And I talked a little bit about fundraising totals when you look at Make-A-Wish. So I'm using numbers to basically show what my contribution really means. And then be realistic with your hours and your weeks. So there's an hours in a week section often. So how many hours do you spend doing this for how many weeks? So be very realistic with it. Don't think that you can overestimate them and put a lot of hours, because admissions officers will go through your application and they'll look at how many hours you say per week and they'll total up those hours. And if you're saying that you're doing 45, 50 hours of community service a week when they add up this section really quick, then they're going to know something's up because that's over, that's overtime if you had a job. So definitely be realistic, but also don't sell yourself short. Don't lowball these numbers just because you are scared that they think that you're lying about it. Just be honest. All right, so we're gonna move on to awards and honors now, and everybody always asks me, but what if I don't have more than 5 awards and honors? And I think it's totally okay if you don't. You don't need to fill up every section, just in general. It's about the quality over the quantity. So the quality of each section matters in terms of your contribution, in terms of the award. So just keep that in mind. Again, use numbers like I did earlier, empirical data to demonstrate the level of your awards. So some awards are given on a kind of school level, some are given on a regional level, and then some are given on a national level. So I chose to include, I believe, just looking at this, 2 nationals, 2 regionals, and then a school award, because those were the ones that I felt were most compelling. And then you can also send UC updates after submission, which a lot of people don't know. But one thing I do want to point out was, for example, the first one, let's say, was the Coca-Cola Scholar semifinalist. So I said out of approximately 90,000 applicants, 1,936 students were chosen due to their outstanding leadership, so on and so forth. But what I didn't know at that time was that I didn't know whether I would advance to the next round, because there's another round after that where those 36 students are reduced to 250, and then there's another round where they're reduced to only 150. So I was lucky enough to be a part of that 150 students out of 90,000 that were selected, and I really wanted the UC schools to know that. So as soon as I found that out, I sent an update to them, and you can do that through your portal. So as you go through senior year, if you make progress on certain projects or you receive certain awards, you can definitely update the school, the UCs that you've applied to. Not just UCs, but other schools also allow you to send updates. And my last piece of advice is to pick a variety of awards if possible. So if you're an athlete, a writer, a scholar, if you have a special talent and you've won an award for it, show that you're diverse in terms of all your awards. I think that's a really strong thing to show to the UCs. If you're really strong in one section, maybe just show all your awards for that. But if you can pick a variety, that'd be really cool for a UC to see that you excel in multiple fields. All right. So we're going to talk about extracurricular activities, and this is an extremely wide section, extracurricular activities. Many of my extracurricular activities were associated with school or outside of school, and I just want to point out that some of these volunteer and community service, some of these are, they're more leadership related than they actually are volunteering and community service. But one of the best pieces of advice that I received was that the person reading your application is going to go through them so quickly that they're not going to knock you if they're not 100% volunteer and community service, if they don't fall into that category. They're just reading to see exactly what you did, and if it doesn't fit their idea of volunteer and community service 100%, they're not going to knock you because of the speed at which they're reading your application. Just like if you were to put something for volunteer and community service here, they're not going to knock you because it wasn't in the other section. They're just going through it as quickly as they can. So you can split or combine activities by year. So we're going to look at ASB leadership, and I was in leadership for 4 years, and I had a different position each year. So maybe leadership was your thing throughout high school, let's just say, right? Or one club or one organization. You can definitely split that up into 4 separate categories. So you can do 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade if you wanted to. But because I had other things I wanted to talk about, I decided to clump it all up into one, which is totally okay. Include positions of leadership. So if you can subtly integrate what your positions of leadership were, I think that would be really cool and really strong. So I did that in parentheses. I did that twice. I did that with ASB leadership and the California Scholarship Federation. So I basically talked about very briefly what we did, and then I talked about 9th, 10th, and 11th, 12th, what positions I served. And I was able to do that because I utilized abbreviations. Abbreviations that make sense and people can recognize, such as the and symbol, or such as pres dot for president. Show a variety of your skill set. Again, if you're a very well-rounded individual, show that through your extracurriculars. Pick the 5 most meaningful that you can think of. You may or may not have more. If you have less, that's totally okay. It's not the time, I said it's no the time. It's not the time to be humble, but it's also not the time to lie. So definitely don't be humble about what you've contributed, because this is your time for you to kind of show off what you've done. But also, it's not the time for you to you know, put a ridiculous amount of hours or activities that you actually haven't done, because in the end, that's just going to hurt someone else's chances, and it may even come back to hurt you in the long run. All right, so exercise alert. So a lot of people have trouble condensing their thoughts, accomplishments, and descriptions. So I'm talking about these sections. If you were to write a description for ASB leadership, or if you were to write a discussion for committees, if you were to write ASB leadership or California Scholarship Federation, if you were to write that description, like, damn, I did a lot. How can I condense that? So here is the exercise that you can do that I think is really helpful. First, write out a full description of what you did. Don't worry about the word count. Write out a full description of what you did. So include positions, stats, and etc., all of that. Then go through and just highlight the key points, the very bare bone key points, phrases that you can reduce that are 10 words to 1 word, or just stats that you want to include, and then combine those key points to condense your description. Now, this process may seem a little bit intuitive. However, it can be extremely helpful for you to just put all your thoughts out there and then condense them to make sure that you hit every point that you want. So that's a cool exercise that I think you can do to be able to condense your thoughts and have a killer description. Now we're going to move on to personal information and test scores. This is honestly the easiest section of any application, but ironically, you may need help from the parent. And I'm only saying that because personal information, they often ask you about some of your parents' personal information in terms of where they were born, where they went to school, what occupations they currently have or previously have held. So you may need to ask them just to be precise with that, and it's a listing of facts. It's essentially just a listing of facts, because you can't lie about certain things like your SAT and your ACT and your AP or your subject test scores. I'll hopefully make a whole different video about how you can put together your scores and how you can kind of master the SAT or the ACT or an AP test or a subject test. It'll be kind of like an overview of what you can do and what schedule you can put together to be successful, and just some tips I saw along the way when I took the SAT. But again, just listing your scores. Always check on the last SAT or the ACT you can take, because sometimes you can sometimes there's an ACT or an SAT you can take after you've submitted your application that you can send to the school, which is pretty cool, I think. My only advice for this section, really big advice, is be honest, because everything can come back to you. Come back to bite you, I guess, if you want to say. This is the section where a lot of people think that race or your socioeconomic bracket somehow will affect your chances of being admitted to a university, and they may or they may not at the end of the day. But please don't lie to be able to increase your odds or your chances, because universities will check sometimes, and I've heard cases where students have gotten caught and they don't get into a single university because they unform other universities. So be honest, because really everything can come back to bite you, and it's a lot more common than people think. All right. Additional comments. Now, this is not my additional comments page. There's actually a section called additional comments on most applications. They allocate the space for extra comments. Oftentimes the space is limited, but it's pretty ample, so you can put additional comments that can elaborate on any part of your application. And that's a very vague use for it, so I want to kind of break down what else you can do with that. It can be used to explain potential red flags on your app. So if there's something that you think an admissions officer will be like, hey, why did you score so low on this section? That's something I kind of used because I had an injury in my hand, so I wanted to explain to them how my writing speed was impaired. But can be used to explain potential red flags, such as that, points of confusion, circumstances. So if there's certain life circumstances which affected your ability to perhaps participate in extracurriculars. I talked about fasting and how I couldn't go to Boy State. So, certain areas that you think a admissions officer might be confused about, or you just want to explain, or if you just want to elaborate on maybe an extracurricular or something that was really meaningful to you, and those character count was just not enough, and it didn't show up anywhere in your personal insight questions, or didn't show up anywhere in your essay or your short answers, then you can use that space to do exactly that. And I think the additional comments section is really cool, but I would do some research into how you can use that additional comments section appropriately. because you don't want to treat it like another essay. It's not supposed to be an opinion-based writing essay. It's supposed to be very to the point and objective. All right. So final homework assignment for workshop number 4 is to apply to college. The best advice I can give to you, and this is going to sound really generic, but be yourself, be simple, and be honest. Because if you're yourself, then you'll be admitted for yourself, and you'll get to go to a university being yourself, which is essentially what you want to do. Be simple. You don't need to be the next president of the United States in your application. You don't need to find the cure to cancer. You just need to be simple and talk about what you've done and how that affects your future goals, and be honest. I can't stress that enough. Because not only is it a personal thing with yourself that you should be honest, but nobody wants to get into school because they lied. And if you do, if you're morally okay with that, then it's time to check that compass. But that is my final advice. I hope you guys enjoyed this 4-workshop series, and I hope you gained something from it. Thank you.